Alrighty, thank you very much. I wanted to thank JobAdder obviously for hosting today's event, which is obviously focused on diversity and inclusion, which is a very important topic. And also wanted to thank each of the panel members for participating today. To begin with, I thought we might start with the panel members, and if you're able to introduce yourselves, that would be much appreciated. So Stuart, perhaps if you can start who you are, the business you work for and what you do, that would be good.
Hi everyone, Stuart Pearson from Mirvac. I'm a National HR Manager. Been with Mirvac for 9 years. Mirvac is a property developer with a workforce of 1,400 employees over a very, very broad and eclectic range of occupations.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yeah, hi. So I might take up the whole session when I give you my title. I'm currently the Acting Deputy Secretary for Regional New South Wales in the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. I'm normally the Executive Director of Public Works Advisory in the Regional New South Wales team. I'm here as sort of giving you a government perspective at the moment. Public Works is one of the oldest public institutions in New South Wales. Probably interestingly, our average age is 52 and we're only about 28% female of our 400 strong workforce at the moment. So we have some specific challenges and some interesting examples in that space. Regional New South Wales is about 600. I'm working in a group that's about 4,000 in REA in DPI.
Thank you. And Brooke?
Thank you. So my name's Brooke Shaw. I'm the Senior Manager of Culture, Talent and Organisational Development here at Dexus. So it's nice to get this view looking over Australia Square. I've been at Dexus for about 2 years now, and as part of my role, I'm accountable for designing exceptional employee experiences. That also includes future employees, so for all the candidate experiences, whether you're successful or unsuccessful in gaining a role at Dexus. So this audience has any questions in that space, happy to provide some insights. Dexus is an Australian property manager and developer. So comparative to Stu, we don't actually construct anything. But we partner with organisations like Mirvac. The average age of our employees is 38.2. We have 649 employees as of yesterday, based here in Australia, so across all the major cities and in some regional areas where we manage centres, like retail centres, and Centre Group owns them. In terms of the age, so quite different challenges. I'm also I'm really trying to hire more mature age workers and thinking like, why don't we reflect the Australian population? You should swap. Talk afterwards. In terms of our workforce, from a gender perspective, 55% female and 37% in our senior manager roles as well and higher.
Okay, fantastic. So just to talk through the structure for today, we have around about half a dozen questions which we're going to work our way through, and then we'll throw over to the floor for questions afterwards as well. So getting right into it, diversity and inclusion is a broad and varied area. It means different things to different people and different things to different businesses. So if we start with each of the panel members, if you're able to define what diversity and inclusion means to you as an individual and also the business that you work with.
Just before I do that, Nick, 2 things. Our average age at Mirvac is 38 as well, but I don't know about the decimal point. So I don't know if we're younger or older. And also Rebecca and Brooke and myself are all members of the New South Wales Diversity Committee as part of the Property Council. In terms of what diversity and inclusion means to Mirvac, so our purpose is to reimagine urban life. It's a very broad, wide-ranging purpose. And so if we think about that, we've also got to think about who are our customers, who are our communities that we want to serve, and we've got to reflect that. And so to do that, we really need to think about having a diverse workforce to kind of match the communities that are out there and to provide an inclusive workplace. And that obviously means free from discrimination, but also encouraging this idea of diversity in whatever form it can take. And fundamentally, that is about embracing differences of all of us as individuals and really kind of capturing that. We see that to some extent as being our competitive advantage. So we're really quite committed to this idea of diversity and inclusion. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay. Rebecca?
I agree with all of that. I think it's quite important to have some standard definition or base definition for a business. So even though it means different things for different people, probably in practice. So in government, we have some pretty clearly defined definitions. We talk about diversity being visible and invisible, or seen and unseen characteristics that make us all unique. And we talk about inclusion being genuine participation and collaboration and contribution. And there's a lot of talk about bringing your whole self to work. So that is on the Public Service Commission website. You can find it there. And the 400,000 government bureaucrats all know what that means. Personally, in practice, for me, particularly in the businesses that I work in at the moment, I think it means primarily respect and kindness. I think kindness is a really interesting concept, and I work with a bunch of old project managers and engineers primarily, and I stand up there and talk about kindness, and they all sort of look at me, and I say what kindness means it is, first of all, it's underrated in corporate life, but it basically means that we have high standards, we don't drop our standards, but we're slow to judge. And I think if you apply that in a corporate environment, it's really important, and it makes people think about what they're doing. We've had a lot of death in our team recently. We had an engineer that didn't turn up to work on Tuesday who had died overnight. We've had somebody that's lost a 25-year-old son, another one of our team who lost a husband, etc., etc. We had about 6 deaths quite close to us. So we've all been thinking about how much time we spend at work, you know, why we're at work, how we work, and I think diversity and inclusion and that bringing your whole self is really important. So joy and kindness and respect are things that are generally not spoken about in infrastructure businesses, certainly not amongst some of our older male staff, and I think they're starting to listen to me.
So it has been embraced then?
Yeah, they start to look at me slightly oddly, but they're certainly listening. I gave a very similar talk at a bunch of emergency management engineers. There was about 120 of them, and my young business analyst who'd actually written most of what I was saying said to me afterwards, all the women were just nodding at you. And I said, yeah, but there was only 3 of them. So it's certainly, I think that particularly when we had one of our engineers who just didn't turn up to work, and we actually sent somebody, and he was found dead at home. He lived by himself. They were pretty shaken up, and many of those people have worked together for 35 years, 20 years. So I think that they were starting to think about how they work, and I think if you actually give those examples and those concepts, I don't think they think I'm crazy. I think they're actually thinking, how I've been here a long time, and what am I doing? Why am I doing it? There's some really good research on purpose of infrastructure businesses that have traditionally been results driven and outcomes focused, etc. And in fact, you get better results if you're purpose driven. So we in government, we're very clear, and particularly in the public works business, we're very clear on what our purpose is, and then how you get there and the way that you work and to achieve that purpose is really important.
And Brooke?
Yeah, so absolutely echo what Stuart and Rebecca both said. Again, sort of common theme here in terms of purpose-driven organisations. So we're about creating a space where people thrive. So we've been doing a lot of work recently, sort of unpacking what that means to us. Is it around having, you know, an inclusive workforce? Yes, but predominantly it's sort of now emerging. It's around keeping our people safe and well. And part of that is that psychological safety and ensuring it's somewhere that people can share their ideas freely and openly and know that they won't be judged, that they'll be respected. And I liked the slow to judge as well. So it's not that it won't happen eventually, but yeah, let's just, you know, suspend that judgment for some time. So we're going through a whole of company sort of transformation, if you like, at the moment to ensure that those behaviours are being followed at all levels of the business. But to me, it's about competitive advantage. And I think, you know, the theme for today and that focus on data, it is a soft and fluffy topic, or it perhaps been given a bit of a bad rap. I think individuals in the business almost eye roll, and it's a shame, but they think, oh, they're going to talk to me about women again. And like, it's sad that that's the case. I'm really enjoying, you know, personally, for me, it means competitive advantage. But it also means culture, because the only way to actually achieve an inclusive environment or culture where those ideas can be shared is by actually changing not just the policies or putting a purpose statement up, but truly providing the opportunity for individuals to speak up that have diverse opinions, that it's about the invisible and visible, diversity as well.
I think one important point there is that you don't get the benefits of diversity unless you've got an inclusive culture. So you actually need both. And I think over time we're seeing that conversation broaden from just diversity and the data on how many women you've got here to the inclusive part. And you actually need both to get the benefits.
Brooke, you kind of touched on it there, but I guess how do we physically define the value that diversity and inclusion can bring to a business? So how do we go from something that can be perceived as being soft and fluffy to something that is hard? And if you're sitting down with your CEO, how are you able to champion that with them so that they can see the value in D&I?
Music to job adders' ears, data. Data. Measure, report, repeat. Like, that's it for me. Data's been absolutely crucial for us at Dexus. So we have quite a sophisticated, I'd like to think, employee listening strategy. So we have a combination of key data that we gain on diversity, so like a census, if you like, that's run annually. But what we're really keen to do is throughout the employment life cycle, be gaining those Uber ratings, those how you're going, have you felt included today, blast ratings across the business immediately after they've had an experience, whether that be an interview, whether that be an onboarding experience, whether that be a one-on-one with their manager, where we're focusing on, okay, what was that experience and capturing the data, and then reporting that monthly to our executive. We're being transparent, sharing that data across the entire business immediately. Close a survey Thursday, share that data Monday. There's no reason not to. And quarterly up to our board as well. So data has been king for being able to show progress in each of the areas, so we can actually see that we're making a difference. Yeah, and real-time data.
Stuart?
Yeah, I might just add to that. Fundamentally, you know, when you make some claim, the response should be prove it. And so with data, you can prove it. So for example, at Mirvac, we have a shared care parental leave policy where people have access, primary caregivers have access to 20 weeks paid parental leave, male or female. And so that's been in place for about 2 years, and 16% of those taking the 20 weeks paid leave are male. So that's one of the criteria that has allowed us to be seen recently as the second best place for dads to work. And it's also normalising this idea that fathers can spend time with their children, like a full 20 weeks with their child. And that also enables their partner to perhaps re-enter the workforce much more quickly. So data is king. And certainly it doesn't mean that we're beholden to it and we must justify everything we do. But if someone says prove it, we should be able to prove it.
Okay.
I
Rebecca?
was just going to say, I don't think there's any dispute anymore that you get better business outcomes and better business decisions with a more diverse and inclusive workforce. I mean, you only have to pick up the Harvard Business Review or any of the Property Council documents. There is evidence everywhere. And if I had a senior person that I was reporting to that didn't believe it, everything, I would send them copy after copy after copy, and every communication that went out would include an attachment to something. I think there is general acceptance, certainly in the world that we are moving in, that it's right. I think what we actually need to be focused on now is the how. Male champions of change in property and government, etc. I think it's generally accepted, but we've got to actually make some difference that way.
Yeah. So speaking of the how, it would be good to be able to get some tangible examples of different policies and processes and procedures that you've implemented within your respective businesses, private sector, government, that I guess are working at the moment.
So with the parental leave, as I say, 20 weeks paid, male or female. Also superannuation, whether you're on paid leave or unpaid leave for the first 12 months. Also very flexible arrangements in how you return to work. Flexibility is a key driver for us at Mirvac, providing a flexible workforce. We're not concerned where you are. We are concerned about outcomes. And so 75% of our workforce have some kind of flexible arrangement. We call that a My Simple Thing. We also have unlimited paid volunteering leave. Unlimited paid volunteering leave since January this year. And that enables our staff to connect with communities in a meaningful way as they wish. In terms of domestic and family violence, we have paid up to it's 10 days per occasion of paid leave for anyone impacted by domestic and family violence, and up to $5,000 financial support per occasion for anyone affected by domestic and family violence. And so these things are absolutely respected by our workforce, and they create what I would say is a psychologically safe employer. We have 5 years in a row of WGEA citation, so we are an employer of choice when it comes to gender equality. So these are very tangible, I guess, strings to our bow, and we do it because it's the right thing to do. Fundamentally, we don't do it to. Yes, it can become our competitive advantage, but it's the right thing to do. And don't take this the wrong way, Rebecca, but
Here we go.
corporations should be leading the way in terms of what they can do to create not only psychologically safe workplaces, but highly engaged workforces. We can wait for government regulation, and that's great, but that shouldn't stop us, really pushing the envelope in terms of what's possible to look after our employees.
Rebecca?
Yes, I agree with all of that.
But?
No, I'm not going to say but. I think I might talk about some of the things that we've done that haven't worked as well in some places and some that have worked well. I think you can't underestimate the importance of role models. So I'm the first non-technical female lead of a business that's been around for more than 160 years. I can't tell you how many females in our business have sent me emails with a number of exclamation marks on the bottom of it, woohoo kind of thing. I think that is really important. So promoting even one and then bringing some more, I think that role modeling is really good. That has created a lot of energy in our business. People, it's visible, so that's good. We have formed a committee, have an action plan from really tiny tactical things, like we ran a first female all staff meeting. So that's about 800 or 900 people. It's once a month. It always has a theme, and we decided that we would just run an all-female, all-staff, and we decided that we wouldn't tell anybody. So our deputy secretary at the time was male. He normally ran it. He had made a recent commitment to delegate more. So I basically stood up and said, given last month he made a commitment to delegate more, I'm it today. I'm going to run the all-staff. We always have a hot seat where we have 3 or 4 staff talking about the theme. It might be honest conversations or whatever. They were all female. We had a guest speaker who was female, etc., but we didn't tell anybody that we were doing it. We made no comment about it being all female. And then we always send the survey out afterwards. What did you think about the all staff? And we got some really terrible comments. Some people, we got some like, the girls smashed it, that kind of thing. And some people were like, that's not diversity. What did you think you were doing, etc., etc. We then spoke to some experts who work in the diversity and inclusion field, and they say, if you want to make real change, you don't just like smash somebody with it. You tell them what's coming, you tell them why you're doing it, etc., etc. And I thought, oh yeah, that might have been a better way to do it. We just sort of had it on our action plan. Wouldn't it be great, to have all females? Because we thought that most of the time they're all males up there, and the females never say anything. So I think that's sort of an important lesson. Get some expert help. The entities that I know that do it really well seem to partner with other experts, so career trackers on sort of refugee programs, Supply Nation on the Aboriginal side. The entities that do it really well partner with experts in that field, and they get some advice. In government, we never have any money. We just tend to try and fumble along with people that make it up. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're not. One of the other big themes at the moment, I think we were talking about this earlier, is generic leadership. So again, if I use myself as an example, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a project manager, but we run more than $3 billion worth of projects every year. So how do I do that? With some criticism, we tend to say, well, you've got these leadership skills, we'll put you into that business. And certainly in government at the moment, particularly with the latest lot of changes, we're putting women into roles where they don't have the technical expertise, and then we're not supporting them. So I think, and then they fail, and we go, oh, well, women can't do that. They're hopeless. You can't put somebody that doesn't have, an engineering degree in charge of that business. So I think the concept of generic leadership is really good, but when we're putting people without technical skills in roles that have traditionally required technical skills, we need to support them really well. Now, I get around that personally. I by probably a lack of ego, I go into most meetings and go, I know nothing about this, so you're going to have to teach me. You got 5 minutes, we've got to make a decision, right? And then I have some good legal reasoning practice and skills, and I go, well, that doesn't make any sense. You've just told me A, and now you're telling me B. That couldn't possibly be right. Let's go again. Not everybody operates a business like that. That seems to work pretty well. But so I think that concept of generic leadership is really good, but we need to support diverse candidates in that space. You don't just put a woman into that role and sink or swim. The other thing we do quite well in government is that we give people an opportunity to learn the business. One of the other reasons I can do the role that I'm in now is because I was really well supported and sponsored by the male leader of the business. So I had a couple of years in the business as basically his 2IC, learning the business. So when I took over from him, everyone was like, oh yeah, of course she can do it because we've seen her. And he spent 2 years telling everyone that I could do it. That was helpful. I've got a good example this week. I've got a vacant director role. And instead of advertising that, I'm going to put somebody acting into that role for 6 months. I know if I advertised it now and went through a government process, that person wouldn't be able to answer all the questions that she has to answer. The questions would be, tell us last time you put an IT program into something or other, or had experience doing something, and we would have 35 male candidates who'd been doing it for 35 years. I know she can do it, but we'll give her 6 months in an acting role before we advertise it. And then when we advertise it and we ask the questions, she'll be able to say, I can do this, I can do that. I've done this even in the last 6 months. She'll know the business much better. She'll be able to answer the questions. Doesn't mean that she's guaranteed. We might get another left field, but at least we've given her a much better opportunity than we have just advertised it now. I'm 100% sure I would have ended up with another male candidate who looks exactly the same as all the other males. That
You're supporting her to be successful,
yeah.
clearly.
Yeah. Talking for too long, sorry.
Definitely not. Brooke, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I just, yeah, well, yes. So more, I get simple. For me, it's about being pragmatic when I'm having those sort of conversations, or how am I going to tackle, if you go diversity and inclusion, it is a huge topic. And the way, you can break it down. So a bit of a maturity assessment would be my advice. So there's 2 lenses. You can go, okay, there's the focus areas. So the things we were talking about. So do I want to focus on LGBTI? Do I want to focus on gender? Do I want to focus on disability? And accept that, we've certainly had to accept, because, you're looking at the diversity team right now at Dexus. There's only so much you can do, and that's okay. So look at the different focus areas. Where do you want to focus on? First, what makes sense for your business right now? So if you do have even a rough idea of what your shape and profile is now, then use that data to figure out, okay, well, what do we want to focus on first? And based on that maturity assessment. And then it sort of breaks down that whole adage of, eat an elephant one bite at a time. It's not this big, scary, lofty, massive thing. Also think about, in those focus areas, what are the multipliers? So things like inclusion have an impact on all different types of focus areas. So if you lift the bar on inclusion, you're not only including LGBTI, but it's the cognitive diversity, gender diversity, age diversity. So think about, if you only have so much time, what's something you can do that will have a broad impact? Flexibility has a similar impact. It's a multiplier, has a multiplier effect. Then overlay that with a bit of an understanding of the life cycle. Okay, so there's things we can do with measuring and reporting. What are we doing in talent acquisition to reinforce it? Because organizations aren't, like, if you, again, coming back to release a policy, or you might run one awesome smashed it session, but what happens if you're the girl that started 2 weeks later? Like, where's the systemic change? For me, again, with limited resources to do this, it's around pragmatic and systemic change. So if the team can tell me, that this will be an ongoing impact, then that's something that gets approved. So yeah, I look across the entire life cycle and build it into the day-to-day process. That'd be my advice.
Just on that, Stuart, I guess as Brooks just outlined, there are a number of different parts to both diversity and inclusion. What's the process that Mirvac went through to define what you wanted to focus on initially?
Well, we focus on them equally. I think that they as Rebecca has said, they need to be treated holistically. So you can't really separate the two. However, they're quite different. So one of the ways, and again, being data driven, is that we actually measure the levels of inclusion in our business through an engagement survey. So we have what's called a people leadership index, and that measures the inclusive leadership styles of our people managers. And it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone that those managers that have an inclusive leadership style have the most engaged and motivated workforces. The idea of being a command and control type leader is well and truly in the past, as far as we're concerned. And so we do apply, whether it's to inclusion or to diversity, we apply data. In terms of how we define them, we went through a process, obviously, of involving our key stakeholders. So our ELT, MLT, of which I think there's a total of about 50 senior leaders at Mirvac, 40% are female. And basically asking them, what did it mean to them? And then refining that process to have fairly common sense definitions. But we're not necessarily beholden to those definitions. They're a starting point, because the proof of the pudding is in how we behave. Have we created a diverse workforce? And I absolutely agree that diverse groups of people will make better decisions. There's no question. That's not conjecture anymore. And similarly, inclusion can create a competitive advantage. We know that. So definitions, and we have an inclusion policy and a diversity and inclusion strategy. That's the starting point. But you've actually got to live it and breathe it, to make it true and to make it authentic.
Okay. Just moving on to the next question. So the three of you are all obviously experts in your respective businesses and fields. Where do you draw your inspiration from? Where do you learn about diversity and inclusion and get your ideas from that you're able to go and implement back into your businesses again?
Okay. Yeah. I'll keep it brief.
Aside from each other.
So yeah, aside from each other. I was going to say, so probably three different areas. So we've already touched on some, the experts. For each of those focus areas, there's an expert organisation out there. Whether it's Career Trackers, Supply Nation, Diversity Council of Australia, they're there to support you. SageCo from an age perspective. Then it would be peers in the industry, but by and large outside of industry, because I think we can become a bit of navel gazing and only comparing ourselves against other property organisations. So that's nice, but there's always an organisation that's doing better, whether outside Australia and outside the property industry. But again, comes back to experience design. For me, the customer experience design expertise out there is a lot, they're further ahead than us. So for me, it's about human-centered design, and that always starts with your customer. So we, with any experience design, it starts by talking to our people. What are they experiencing? Whether that's through hosting workshops or phone calls with them to understand what's the current challenge. And once we understand the problem, then we can design a solution that solves that problem. And we go through iterations or updating that experience. And so far it's working. We're seeing the change.
Good. Rebecca?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I'd probably only add sort of empowering your staff, no matter where they are, what level they are, whether they're sitting, one person in Broken Hill or whatever, and supporting their ideas is really important as well. We ask in a lot of our interviews, we ask our candidates, what does diversity mean to you? And I reckon 99% of them nail that question. They give you a whole piece. They don't just talk about gender or equality or whatever. They talk about diversity of thought, etc. So I don't know whether that sometimes brings systemic change. I think think big, start small often works. We have one recently, and one of our EAs found an Indigenous catering company, and now that team uses that company for all their catering. That's really small to us, and it's not systemic, but it's massive to that catering company. So I think big, start small, use everybody, use all your resources is all I'd add to that.
I think at Mirvac, we're very fortunate, and certainly in my space of HR, we have permission to explore what's possible, and that doesn't happen at many organisations. So I'm taking full advantage of that. I am seeing absolutely what's possible. So as an example, we've had 50-50 male-female board representation for about the last 5 years. And I think we're one of 2 ASX top 50 companies to have that, which is on one hand is great, but on the other hand is quite tragic that there's just not enough females at board level. One of our ELT members recently took time off to foster their child. Our chairman is a property male champion of change. So we have that leadership, and from a HR point of view, I'm fully exploiting that opportunity. I say that without hesitation, and I will continue to do that. So we are allowed to play in that space, and that allows us to challenge virtually everything we do, including areas of recruitment, and to be quite different in how we approach looking for diverse candidates. And we absolutely subscribe to looking for any kind of background, any kind of sexual preference, whatever the case may be. It really is the best person for the job. But to Rebecca's point, and I absolutely agree, that sometimes you've got to be a bit creative in how you recruit. And we were having a conversation earlier, and my personal view is when you're recruiting for someone, you just talk to them and you just listen to them. I don't have any questions. I just want to understand what makes them tick. What do they do on the weekends? What's their favourite book? I want to get them talking and get to know them. There is the technical skills are a threshold, and maybe you don't even need them, right? I think if a person has outstanding people skills and is a strategic thinker or a lateral thinker, for me, they're just as important, if not more important, because then you've got to set them up for success. So we look at this issue holistically about creating the right kind of culture and continuing to build on that.
Okay.
I just add to that part of the conversation that we were having is the government has a completely different approach to recruitment from that. We have very structured panels, which are supposed to create diverse and inclusive outcomes. But if you take the no questions, just have a chat. My question was, well, how do you ensure that you don't just get the person that looks exactly the same as you, that does the same thing as you on the weekend? So I think the answer to that is possibly with the open mind, looking for different criteria. But I think that's a really hard balancing act, and that's where you'd be needing to track and use your data to work out what your outcomes are with that process. I don't think the government's outcomes are right, and we can tell that with the data as well, because our People Matter survey, the recruitment satisfaction is the lowest of anything. People are not satisfied with the recruitment processes, that they're fair and transparent, etc., whereas they're very well sort of structured. So we don't have it right at that end, and I don't know that it works completely at that end either. So that's not really an answer, but it's a
bit of work to be done. I think the final formal question focuses on a lot of goodwill in the room and people that are responsible for embarking upon a D&I journey within the businesses that they represent. So being experts, is there any advice or guidance that you might be able to give to them?
I think I'd have to echo Rebecca's. I think big, but start small.
Look, I would say just be authentic. Don't do anything that's really tokenistic. And Brooke and I were talking about this earlier as well. Look, having a mental health day is great, but are you doing it for the right reasons? It's around having a robust, long-lasting culture attached to your brand. So whatever you do in the D&I space is actually going to resonate with your workforce. Is it going to resonate with your leadership group? If it's a poster on the wall, it's not going to work. It's got to have meaning for every unique culture that exists, and you've got to make it work for those organisations. I absolutely believe that every organisation is unique, and it's dynamic. So you want to put in place something that is going to be both at a point in time, because it resonates with that current workforce, but you also think it's going to be long lasting, and just make sure that what you put in place you can embed. It's a common failure to have a policy or a position and you don't embed it, partly because it doesn't resonate with your workforce. Check with your workforce, ask them, listen to them. What do they want?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I was probably just going to say, find some time to think about what difference you can make. It is really important. So often we're just sitting at our desks answering emails, and if you find the time to think about it, even if it's only an hour or two, sometimes you think, yeah, well, we could do that. This might work, and be dynamic, have a go. It is important. Do it. Okay, good.
Thank you. So that's the formal part of the questions finished with. So I think we'll throw over to the floor now, if that's okay. So if anyone has any questions, if you could just explain who you are and the business you work for, that would be Much appreciated. Anyone?
I have one. Fiona, I work for Capstone and I'm lucky enough to be on the diversity committee with these three. I actually have a question for Brooke. I know I've spoken with Rebecca and Stuart before about the topic of ageism. It's one of those things that we've discovered hasn't really been addressed at all in this sort of full spectrum of D&I. You mentioned that within Dexter's. Have you done anything or any research in that forum at all?
Yeah, in regards to age.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually got an employee network, a diversity committee that's represented by individuals from across the business. And they ran a survey across the business to say, what is it that you'd like to see us focusing on more? And age came back, I think it was like 60% said, yes, this is something we'd like to see more of. And when we conducted sort of more workshops to understand what it is about age, it turned out to be more about generational challenges. And I think, again, my mind leapt straight to, oh, it's a mature age thing. We don't have enough, because the analysis that I've done, I think it's 15% of the current labour market in Australia is over the age of 55, which is deemed to be a mature age worker. We absolutely don't have that representation. I think we're roughly around like 4%. So that was, we're not reflecting our community. That's a challenge. But it was actually the younger generations saying, I'd actually like more mentoring, or I feel that there's some ageism around, yes, I don't have the level of experience, but I've only been here for 3 years and I can offer a difference of opinion. So what we did with that is decide, let's start at the beginning and just increase awareness for multi-generational challenges, but also, I guess, to have a bit of fun with it, to increase their understanding. So we hosted trivia nights across the business, and we made sure every single table had a representative from a different generation, and we made all the questions about different things. Give something in Morse code. It was tell us what Nokia was released in this time. I mean, we had a lot of fun. Prime ministers, music challenges, a standard trivia night, but focused on age. And that it was a sellout. I think we had 120 people from the Sydney office alone on a Thursday night come to that. We hosted them in other cities. We also hosted lunch and lead sessions across the business. Again, sort of come and understand. We had an expert from Sageco come and speak to us around what is this 100-year life, and what are the challenges. And by and large, we're all wanting flexibility. This isn't something that these crazy Gen Y kids are coming in and saying that they want. We are all seeking the same things and meaning in our work. And yeah, it began to break down some of those barriers. Finally, from a recruitment perspective, we did a complete audit, an inclusion audit of all of our messaging, both in terms of the candidate conversations and what's in our guides with our acquisition team, but also what's on our website. What are we showing at different university campaigns? Why does graduate recruitment have kickstart your career? That implies it's someone starting their career. It could be someone in career transition. So we've just gone through, and from a language perspective, made sure that we're incredibly inclusive of all ages.
I was just going to add, if you are writing things for any of your leaders, you can build that kind of thing into any message. My weekly newsletter, which I think they read, we have data on how many people read it, was about infrastructure projects the other day, but I managed to get a line in there that said, this is the first time in history we've got 5 generations working together in a workplace. So blah, 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 blah. So you can build some of this messaging in from senior leaders across the business. It's a subtle message about respecting and including, et cetera, that can go into, it doesn't have to be a specific HR message. It was just in my weekly update newsletter, and it was one line, and you're sending a message all the time and building that picture.
Just an anecdote about Mirvac. So it was one of my favourite stories is about 15 years ago, we were looking for someone to join the finance team. We went through a recruitment process and interviewed, and the successful candidate was a 72-year-old male, probably even older than some of these. Most of them.
I've got older than that.
and he stayed with us till he was 84, and was so reliable, completely efficient in his job. But he decided that it was time for a move, and he was quite an eccentric character. So, for example, he lived in Vaucluse, but he could only drive his car in a straight line. He couldn't turn corners, so he could only go up the street to
2 hours to get to work.
public transport. But when he decided he needed a change, he asked me if I could assist him update his CV, which I did. So you know, again, we don't discriminate. We're just interested in, can you do the job? Have you got the right attitude? Are you going to be prepared to do the right thing by the company? And we will look after you.
Good. Any other questions at all? Yep, in the front here.
Apart from obviously sort of people leadership indexes and employee listening strategies, whatever, what other tools and mechanisms are you using to actually capture data, and what other kind of data are those systems and tools maybe providing for the organisation?
Okay. So a couple. So Qualtrics is one that we use in terms of a system to run our employee surveys in. We're also using a program called Enboarder, which is, I guess, via text, or it's a workflow experience design tool. I'm not sure if many are familiar with it in the room, but that's wonderful. We use that for both our onboarding, but also during our parental leave. Yeah, again, not shared out of this room, but sort of emotional intelligence for managers that might be lacking it. It sends a reminder, hey, Brooke's just returning from parental leave next week. How about you set up a coffee? And it will send me an invite that's already pre-drafted, and all I need to do is press send and it will schedule it in my Outlook. But it also uses those Uber ratings that I was talking about. So you've been at Dexus now for 1 week. How have you found your experience? 3 thumbs up. If it's anything lower than 4, you'll get a phone call from whichever, depending on the challenge that you've told. If it's an IT challenge, or I'm not enjoying my manager, or we had one the other day, they gave us 1. And he didn't like the laptop he was given. We resolved it in 2 hours and we got a 5 with now 100% NPS with that individual because of his laptop. And many moons ago, he would have gone on hating Dexus because he got a bad laptop on day 1, which we can now intervene immediately. We also use fireside chats with our GMC, so our executive team that we run regularly. And we also have a program called The Funnel. And everyone at Dexus is told about it when they join, and it's an ideas funnel. So if you see something that you think could be improved, or you think there's a different way that we could be doing something, you put your idea in this virtual funnel and you assign it to an individual or a team that you think might be able to help. That could be the CEO, that could be someone at reception, and that's then assigned, and that individual has 2 weeks to get back in contact with you, and you can brainstorm a way of making that happen. Continuous improvement. So lots of different ways of tools, mechanisms, both face-to-face as well as software to help us out.
Our systems aren't quite so sophisticated, but again, it's just having permission. So we're looking at a piece now which is around mental health and wellbeing. So we're kind of gathering data from a number of fairly perhaps innocuous or unrelated streams and putting them together to see what our workforce looks like. So, for example, I am going to read out some notes here. The most common male name is David at Mirvac. Most common female is Michelle. So for those people that take sick leave, they take 5 days a year, but 35% of our workforce don't take any sick leave whatsoever. People take, of the 20 days annual leave, they take 17. So they're keeping a nest egg of 3 days a year is accruing for whatever reason. We also did some health checks voluntarily on staff. And we found that 9% of our staff have high blood pressure and 35% have high cholesterol. And we know that this is a common challenge. And so this data will give us, obviously ways to track what we can do about it. So I'm doing the 100-day step challenge at the moment. Lots of nudging initiatives can help in this space, but you've got to be data driven. 10 of our workforce, which is a very small number, identify themselves as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. 63 staff identify themselves as having some form of disability. We have staff from 62 countries, regions, or ethnic backgrounds. This data can inform a profile. This data can inform how, in fact, diverse we are, and what we do with this information, we're yet to decide, but we're in the process of gathering that and then looking at what we can do next.
In government, we track all that. We have targets and we track all of that data, and it's in everybody's financial report every month. So in our management team, we would go through number of women in senior leadership positions, et cetera, et cetera. one of the things that we have, for example, we've got 12 executive positions in the team that reports, but there's been no vacancy for 3 years. So instead of just dismissing that and going, well, we're never going to make a difference there until somebody leaves, we go, well, what about our next level down, our 11, 12 grade and our 9, 10 grade? So then we track that data instead, because we're not going to make a difference in just that small team in 12. So we're constantly looking at things like that, where we change the targets, change the data that we're using to try and make a difference.
Any other questions? Yep.
I'm curious to understand a bit more about how you have gone about creating psychological safe workplaces. It's one of those words that gets thrown around a lot at the moment, like resilience, well-being, and D&I to a certain point. I want to understand how you've gone about doing that. You mentioned especially earlier on their explanation there, but more about how that plays out and the relationship with your business outcomes.
Do you want to take that one first?
So I guess I've spoken about some of the initiatives, and they might not have a direct link, but they create a sense of comfort. For example, we know 100 of our employees use what's called a lone worker app. So it's an app on your phone, and we have a lot of female sales staff that might be by themselves at a sales office out somewhere sort of quite distant. And, a male may come up and say, I want to look at a house. And what do? Well, you can set the alarm for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, and it immediately goes back to base to a security firm who will contact you. So that provides a degree of safety. Our position, as I mentioned before, on domestic and family violence provides a position of safety. People feeling that they can work flexibly provides a position of safety. So holistically, these things can contribute. And we use Willis Towers Watson methodology for our engagement survey. And the questions there around safety, Mirvac cares about the health and safety of its employees at work. 95% of our workforce believe that's to be true. And my manager takes appropriate action when unsafe conditions are brought to his or her attention, i.e. physical as well as psychological safety. 93% of the workforce believe that to be the case. So again, we can measure if indeed this is true. So if you ask me to prove it, I believe that we can do so. But we're not necessarily driven by the numbers. It's also a feeling that you have that you're creating a safe workplace because employees can disclose. So if an employee can come up to you and say, look, I am going through a separation or any personal issue, if they feel comfortable disclosing and they feel comfortable that their manager is going to listen to them, not judge them, and also refer them on to a relevant referral pathway as a connector, if you like, rather than an expert, then holistically we are providing that psychologically safe workplace.
And I think staff need to know where you go to do that. So we would constantly advertise on various communications. There's an employee assistance program that you can contact in these circumstances. It's available for this. So constant promotion of all of those things that Stuart's just spoken about is very important, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? No? Okay. Well, I think that concludes today's panel discussion. So thank you very much to the three of you. I'm sure we've all learned a lot.